So I was always of the mindset, listen, live alone, die alone. You encounter people, you give them your best, don't expect anything back from other people. So I really
Oh.
wasn't community minded, right? But
Mm.
as I've gotten older, and also as I was more surrounded in my husband's family, who are very like, they're a tight bunch and there are a lot of them, I
Yes.
realized the importance of having somebody that you can lean on and vice versa. So watching you build Black Women Stitch is beautiful. And I want to know, like, what was the catalyst?
I chose Black Women Stitch because I needed a sewing community where I could be fully and wholly and freely myself.
Mm-hmm.
I had come to this through racial trauma. I had come to this as a Black Lives Matter organizer who had survived a racist terror attack in Charlottesville, Virginia in 2017.
I
In
remember.
our community in Charlottesville, we had white supremacist rallies every month, all summer long in 2017, with the Klan, with Nazis, with neo Confederates, with whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And then in August, there was the largest white supremacist rally in modern history to date. And that was here in Charlottesville. There was brawls in the streets, a state of emergency was declared, and my spouse and I had come out to counter protest
Mm-hmm.
the white supremacists who were rallying in support of our Confederate statues. They
Gotcha.
wanted to keep the what I call Civil War participation trophies
Right.
that they had built for themselves
Right.
with public tax dollars. A philanthropist built some of the Confederate monuments, but they have been long supported by our tax dollars, even as they were in like the white park
Mm-hmm.
had one and Black people couldn't really go to the white park, but our tax dollars went to pay for the pack because it's segregation.
Okay.
In T ways, that rally was a real big mark on that weekend of violence. That it started with a torch march on the campus where I'm a professor, and students and community members were attacked by the torch wielding Nazis. And then there were fights in the streets on Saturday, and it culminated with a white supremacist driving his car down a narrow alleyway of our downtown mall through the crowd of protesters. And I was there as the car came through. This man murdered a woman and injured 20 other people. And it was just utter chaos in the streets. And I had been working, organizing, doing teach-ins, helping to do press releases. And I co-founded a media collective to, to connect activists with media so that our messaging was clear as opposed to, what the state's messaging was going to be about this event or whatever. And after this happened, it was a terrible thing. After this happened, we wake up screaming for weeks. It's just a lot. I make the mistake of going to a quilt retreat a month later out of town. This is the same quilt retreat that I had been going to for like 15 years. I was definitely always the only Black person in this all white group. And I attended the retreat. People were asking how I was. I was like, oh, it was scary. It was terrible. But I really came to make my quilt blocks. That was why I was there, to do my quilting. And I learned during that event that a rule had been made that Charlottesville, which is the town I am in, Charlottesville, Virginia, that Charlottesville was not to be discussed. That was the rule. And it was not because they wanted to protect my feelings. It was because the event organizer didn't want to hear about it. So there's been this huge terrorist attack down the road, about an hour away from where the retreat is taking place a month later. And I am there as someone who was wounded by this experience, but this person doesn't want to hear it. So I was like, okay, fine. She was pretty rude to me the entire weekend that I happened to be there. But I was like, okay, fine, whatever. I get home, I check the mail, and there's a check that I have written for the next year's event with this same organizer.
Wow.
My check was returned to me. No note, no nothing, just a check being sent back in an envelope. And so my dumb self says, let me call the one person I know who I have their phone number for and see maybe the event was canceled. I talked to this woman and she says, no, the event wasn't canceled. I just think you broke the rule.
Oh my
And the
goodness.
rule was that Charlottesville was not to be discussed, and you discussed it.
Wow.
I don't think she's prejudiced. I just think, and I said, and that was the end for me.
Sure.
And when I tell you, girl, I was so sad.
Mm-hmm.
I was so heartbroken. I had been sewing with those women for 15 years.
Wow.
When my baby was born, it was like up in the air whether I was going to come or not come because he was born in September and the retreat was also in September. And I came out there 9 months pregnant, big as day, because I really wanted to sew and quilt. And I had been so used to having that as something I would do in the fall. And it was just like a peace practice for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when my father died unexpectedly, I was at a retreat. These women packed up my car in 30 minutes and I was on the road and then on a plane. And this is how that community had moved in the past when there was tragedy.
Mm-hmm.
But that wasn't extended to me
Mm-hmm.
by the organizer. And that's because I just gonna say it. I think she's racist.
For sure.
Period.
She was on their side, clearly.
Essentially, she was believing, and I had heard her say similar things about Nazis having free speech rights in America and why free speech. And I'm like, Nazis don't get to have free speech rights in this country.
No.
We are not a fascist dictatorship yet.
Mm.
We don't, what?
Right.
Anyways, after that, I was crushed. I was so heartbroken. It was terrible. Yeah. And then after I got sad, after I was finished being sad, I got embarrassed. And it made me ask myself, who did these people think I was all this time in their imagination? That they would be somehow shocked that I would think Black Lives Matter.
But what people think about us in their imagination, like who they create, right, in their minds about us it's not on us.
That is true. Other people's opinions of me are none of my business. And that helped. And yet it fueled me to build something that I knew that I needed. It helped me to look back and say, what type of sewing environment would I be in and be seen and whole and safe and cherished? And it took me right back to childhood. It took me right back to my mother and her cousins sewing for us in the summer times, like my mother and grandmother. I am actually a 6th generation sewist.
That's incredible.
That means that my grandmother's grandmother sewed and was a seamstress.
Wow.
And I grew up with this my whole life. My mother still has a sewing machine to this day, and she'll still get on it and complain a little bit about how it's working or whatnot, or, but that's part of the process. I was really happy to know that I could look back at my past and find a direction for a future.
Yeah.
And so I created Black Women Stitch to be Black from a distance. I was deliberate in the choices that this was Black women stitch. This was not all women stitch. It is Black, and it's not POC, because I think that too often, as you must know, Blackness gets folded into POC. I see that as a type of anti-Blackness, because there are folks who don't want to really help Black people like that. But if you say POC, they're happy to include all the non-whites.
Yep.
But nothing particularly for Black people.
Yep.
And I reject that. I think that everybody from all ethnic groups should reject that. Yeah. I think that everybody gets to rep their set.
Yeah.
Especially in a nation that worked so hard throughout its entire history to build up racial stratification for the purposes of oppression and exploitation. We get to choose if our joy is found in us and in each other. It's interesting that that is what they're trying to criminalize now. It was totally fine when you had Black codes that said that Black people can't live here, Black people can't vote here, Black people can't shop here, Black people can't be on our public sidewalks or our public parks. All of that was lawful for generations. But now you and me want to hang out and give money to other Black people because of the generational depletion of our financial resources and earning power. Now that's illegal.
Of course.
The injury is legal. The healing is illegal.
Absolutely.
And it just compounds that negative effect.